So, begin with the formation. How do you form a home-based Christian community? Well, the way we usually do it is we reach this ideal number of 12. 12 committed adults. Now, that's the ideal number, kind of a biblical number, right? But 12 committed adults. So when we get to that point, we're saying we're starting to get maybe a little big to meet in a house. We're going to meet in somebody's house. We're not meeting in the church or or the undercroft of a church. We're in a house, somebody's own, their living room. Okay. Not only that, it starts getting a little out of control, and as we go through this, you'll see that a lot of the things we have to do to maintain this Christian community are difficult to do if you had, say, 20 adults meeting. So this 12, so when we get to 12, that magic number, we usually start suggesting that we split off, okay, and that we form a new community, or the other thing that happens geographically. Sometimes people don't have anything in their area, and they would like to travel a little less to get to their home-based Christian community. Or maybe you would just like to start one and there's nothing there, and you're far away from us. If you lived on the west side of Cincinnati, you'd trip over home-based Christian communities because they're everywhere over there, okay? But when you get away from there, they're a little less frequent, and in some areas they just don't exist. Okay. We're hoping to solve that a little bit. So we call that branching when we take off from that 12 and we start forming another community. The easiest way to join a home-based Christian community is to join an existing community. And that's what me and my wife did. The New Creations, which we all belong to here, and Diane, the next speaker, also belongs to. They were in existence. They've been in existence, 25 years or something now? And I guess we joined them 4 years ago, 5 years ago, something like that. So we joined a well-established, and the nice part about that is the people there know what the process is. The stuff that I'm talking to you about, the things that are listed in this booklet, they already know. Now, Judy and I found out that sometimes we forget. We had to do a presentation on this several years back, and in preparation, we started going through this booklet, and this booklet, which I highly recommend. This was, Unless the Lord Build a House. This is a question and answer format, and I find a really, really good resource. Okay, but we started going through that, and we said, well, we're members of this New Creations home-based Christian community, but we don't do this. Or we do this, and Father Al, and there's an experience base here. Father Al, when he first started this thing, he wasn't right on track. He had some ideas about what it might look like and what it might be, but experience told him, well, in today's society, that's not going to work. So we not only have the biblical experiences and Father Al's thought process on this, we also have a lot of experience now. And what works, what doesn't work, what you should ask. Now, we don't want to dumb it down. There's no way that we want to say we're going to make this easier than it needs to be just to get people in, because we're committed to excellence. We are committed to excellence. If you're not committed, you don't want to really be part of this. Okay. If you tried to start one from scratch, that's more difficult, obviously, because if you just had a bunch of people, say, in Chicago, that wanted to start a home-based Christian community, you wouldn't have any experience base within the members. But presentation is there to help. They will help you in any way possible, not only the booklets, the online resources, and I think whenever possible, even sending people out who have experience and who know about this to help you get started. Now, around here, it's easy. We just send somebody out to teach out of this booklet, and that's it. If you're in Chicago, it might be a little more difficult. So, we talked a little bit about this, but the first thing you have to do is discern. And it's very important. And one of the things that people sitting here today ought to be talking about and thinking about and discerning is, is this for me? Is this home-based Christian community? Or is it for, maybe in the case of a parish priest or something, is it for the people in my area? Is this something I want to start? So really a big part of this, I mean, that's a spiritual gift of discernment, and you really want to take some time, during the day today, and particularly when you leave here today, just think about where you fit into this. If you're already a member of a Christian community, are we following the guidelines? Are we doing what we should be doing? Or are we kind of strayed away? If you've never been a member, maybe look up. There's lots of resources here. Right here today, there are a lot of people who belong to home-based Christian communities who could lead you toward an existing community, for example. So, one of the things when you discern that I always think about is we always say, well, I just don't have time for that. That's the common excuse. I mean, I've done it. I make that excuse all the time. And I think you have to be honest with yourself. Why don't you have the time? And we have this book by Matthew Kelly. Was it Dynamic Christian, Becoming a Dynamic Christian or Dynamic Catholic? And, he tells a story in there about people, and he was talking about almsgiving in that particular situation, but about a gentleman who gives up cable TV and gives the money, probably $100 a month in these days, to the church. Pretty radical stuff, right? I mean, guys don't want to give up that cable TV or maybe swatting that little white ball around and chasing after it for hours on end, okay? But just think, what am I doing with my life that I can't spend a little more time, in community and at church? I mean, even if it's not in home-based Christian community, all those things I don't have time for, what's taking up that time? So I think you have to be honest with yourself. Okay, so this is not a do-it-yourself thing as far as we're concerned. Our experience and what Father Al wrote and what's in the Bible, we want to follow that. We don't want to just go off and kind of decide on our own thing, because we go awry when we do that. We really start going down the wrong path. One of the things about this, we use the word, a lot of scary words, permanent. When you get into this, think about it. Now, in our case, most of us, myself, I'm thinking, when am I going to quit this Christian community? Well, when they put me in the box and put me in the ground, I'll be done. Okay. The younger communities might be thinking about branching out and doing all those sort of things. So, but it's a permanent commitment. Think about it that way. Now, there's nobody going to put you in jail if you quit. I mean, we don't have any legal power over you or anything. But, think about it in a permanent way. When you go through some kind of experience, like a retreat or, a Life in the Spirit seminar, maybe a Christ Renews His Parish program, usually the question you ask yourself is, okay, I'm on this spiritual high, but now what? Because if you don't do something with it, after this week, if you just go home and put all the materials away and you don't do something with it, you're going to gradually lose the high that you're on right now. Okay? So what do you do with that? One of the things we keep preaching about here is the gifts of the Spirit. Well, how do you keep those alive? If you don't use them, you lose them. Okay? You don't know how to do it. Well, the home-based Christian community is the place that we can really use that. A prayer group is good. I mean, we advocate people getting into a prayer group, but that's usually a once-a-week kind of thing. We don't have this permanence thing necessarily there. The home-based Christian community really is a group of people who know each other, who kind of know about each other, who take the time to say, well, I think that Ben over there, he has the gift of administration. And then I reject and say, oh, no, I don't have that. But people tell you, and you have healing. It's a place to try your healing, your gifts. So it's, all these other things are good ways, but I believe that if you really want to exercise your spiritual gifts, and if you really want to stay on that spiritual high, the home-based Christian community is the best way. It's a way to live out our spirituality. So it's not for everybody. I mean, you really have to think about it, and you have to be committed to this excellence. One of the big barriers for some people is we won't accept, for example, a married couple if just one wants to come in the community, because we don't want to be about splitting up a marriage or anything. So if you want to come into the community as a wife and the husband does not, no. You have to somehow get him involved in the community. And Judy, now in our case, Karen and I, we both kind of came about the decision together. But, I think in Judy's case, her husband was a little reluctant at first. And I think this Bible Institute was one of the things that kind of influenced him that, hey, this isn't such a bad thing. These people are real Catholic people. They're not some far-out group that's, okay. Yeah, you'll hear us talking about what I keep calling home-based Christian communities, which is the right terminology, but you'll hear us talking about our church home. Same thing, okay? Okay, next I want to talk a little bit about leadership, nuts and bolts things, leadership. And, go ahead.
I'm just wondering, how often do you meet?
I'm going to get to that.
Oh, okay.
We should hold questions to the end because it gets on the tape, but I will get to that. Okay. So the leadership, if we don't have a leader, we're kind of like just aimlessly going about. I mean, I think any organization is that way. You need leadership within the organization. And so we need that leadership. And you could think about it, and I kind of picture the sailing ship, in the Acts of the Apostles, maybe with St. Paul on it or something, okay? But it's out in the middle of the ocean, and it's going along. Well, the leader's at the rudder, steering us in a direction. And if you're a rudderless ship, you just keep going in circles, and you never get where you want to be. So leadership is extremely important. It's talked about in both of these booklets about what the leader's qualities and so forth, and I'll get to that in a little bit. I was on the fire department for 30 years, and before that I was in the Army. Now both of those organizations take leadership very seriously. I mean, you have to have somebody leading or it's just a mess, it's chaos. Okay? And we used to say, even a pin has a head. Okay? So somebody's got to be in charge of this group. Okay, unless the Lord build his house. Did you happen to get this booklet?
Yeah, I do.
Okay, on page 15, it talks about leadership. Right in the middle of the page there, it says, leaders are to break the path, burst open the gate, and to go through it. Leaders of Christian communities are the trailblazers. They need the vision to know where the Lord wants them to lead their communities and the courage to overcome all obstacles. So this leadership is a very important thing. Then right below that, they talk about some of the responsibilities of a leader. Has the vision, provides the vision for God's plan for the community, leads others to join. So they're the chief recruiter, although all of us should be recruiters, everybody in the community. Now myself, if I'm thinking about somebody, usually what I will do, Mary Handerman is our leader of our community. And if I'm thinking about somebody, I usually will say, Mary, what do you think about, inviting so-and-so to come to our home-based Christian community? Unite the community with other communities, the parish, the diocese, the universal church. One of the problems when you have a group of people getting together, as a small group, they can start getting this attitude of superiority, you might say. We're the only real Catholics around here. Well, that's not true. There are a lot of real Catholics around, and, they're in other fields. And we are united to our parish. As a matter of fact, Matthew Kelly's book, again, on dynamic Catholics, he talks about, and there's what, 2%? I think so. 9%. It's 9% are people who are really committed Catholics, all right? Dynamic Catholics, as he calls them. And everybody else needs, well, even they need a little work, but they're the people that get things done in the parish. Well, I can tell you that with us, that's the way it is. Each of us in our own way, but most of us are really involved in our parish activities too. So if our pastor calls and says, I need this, like recently he came up and he said, Ben, I know you used to be on the parish council, but so-and-so can't make it anymore because of health reasons or whatever. Would you be willing to serve out his term? Okay, that wasn't I wouldn't have volunteered for that right out of the crowd, but I'm committed to do that. And you find that within the home-based Christian community, that we try to do whatever we can in our parish. We recognize the gifts of each other, and it's a place to exercise the gift. Maintain God's order in the community. Inspire the community to evangelize. Wow, that's another scary word, that evangelization thing, isn't it? And then we strengthen the unity of the members of the community with each other by praying for God's grace and fostering a continual interaction among the members of the community. And then at the end there and at the top of the next page, it says the leaders of a community are responsible, especially to call each member of the community to be responsible for the life and growth of Christian community. Right from the beginning, it is necessary to prepare to be not only consumers of community, but above all, its builders, to be responsible for each other's growth. So there's only one leader for each home-based Christian community. And again, another fire service axiom, when we go on the scene of a fire or an emergency of some sort, we have a person we call the incident commander. And that person is in charge. They tell everybody what to do. They decide on the tactics and strategy that we're going to use, all that sort of thing. And again, an axiom we have is the only thing worse than no incident commander is two incident commanders, right? Two people up there contradicting each other. So we have one. When we talk about decision making on the fire ground or in a battlefield, you have to make these decisions like this. You have to look at what's going on, kind of evaluate, make a quick determination, and do it. And that's called recognition prime decision making, okay? But with us, in the community, in a business atmosphere, you do more consultation. You have more time to think about what's going on. So you want to make those decisions. So even though you have a leader, that leader has to be open to the members and think about what they're presenting, their concerns, or what they would like to do next. An example that we just had was Judy here. After thinking about it and praying about it, thought, we ought to, not this one, the 12-step, we ought to go through this 12-step program again. It's been a while. And as we found out in trying to teach this, we stray a little bit from where we're supposed to be. Now, we just finished the Acts of the Apostles. We did, that was last year about this time, we started the Acts of the Apostles and we just finished it. We took it very slowly, really spent some time. Each person in the community took a chapter. Well, actually, we ended up taking 2 or 3 chapters so we could get through the whole Acts. And, each time we met, we would go through that. So our next 12 meetings are the 12 steps that are in this booklet. And we had to think about that because it kind of goes against a little bit of the teaching, because the teaching from Father Al and what we are supposed to do is involve Scripture in each of our meetings. We're word-based. That's the heart of what we're doing, is we're word-based. So we want to include Scripture. So it was one of the things we had to think about. Well, how are we going to do this? Because there's a whole series of DVDs or whatever on these teachings of Father Al, and he does them, and they're dynamic. Judy looked at him and says, boy, we need to do this again, But we don't want to violate that idea of being scriptural based. But when we look at this, and we look at these 12 steps, and we look at what you do at each meeting, it involves Scripture. So there's scriptural readings for each of those 12 meetings, and we're going to make sure, I mean, one of the things that Mary has to do now is make sure that we stay on track and get into the scriptural aspect of it.